Pam Wagner, and I'm with the Rotary Club of Martinsburg. This is Michelle Maiden, and she's a Rotarian with the Shepherdstown Rotary Club. And we just want to welcome everyone here to beautiful Shepherdstown, very historic Shepherdstown. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you brought us a little bit of clearer skies, so we're very thankful for that. Just a tiny bit of history, and then I'm going to let Michelle speak. Rotary is committed to not just our neighbor next door, but to our neighbor in all parts of the world. So when hot topics that are tugging at our heartstrings, a lot of times Rotary will be there somewhere. Maybe not in the forefront right away, or maybe just on the sidelines, but eventually, if it comes down to humans, somewhere along the line, I think we're involved, and it makes me proud to be a Rotarian. And when we were in Atlanta for the International Convention, anti-human trafficking was in the forefront of that whole program. And to be honest with you, I thought I was a pretty worldly woman, that I knew what was going on, and I realized I knew nothing. Because this problem is in our backyard, and it's in the next person's backyard, and it's in the person's backyard across the pond from us. So through some very wonderful people with Rotary, we sort of decided to write a grant together. And we wanted to partner, because we know it takes a village. It has nothing to do with politics. It takes everyone looking out for everybody. And so we partnered with the Shepherdstown Club, and we are very honored to be doing our part. And before I give the mic to Michelle, I just want to recognize some of the people that we have with us this evening on the Rotary end of it, because that's my part. So right now, we have our district governor with us, which actually, he is from Martinsburg. So District Governor Mike Hornby, will you please stand? And him and his wife have taken on this project also as a personal commitment of theirs, and have done a lot of work with our legislation to have a bill passed, to have phone numbers in every one of the bathrooms and our public restrooms. So we're very thankful for that. We also have our club president here today, which is Mike Height. And we have fellow Rotarians from our club. So if the Rotarians from the Martinsburg Club and the Sunrise, and the Satellite Club, please stand. And before I give it to Michelle, because we both want to do this, it's not on the list, but we really want to thank Rita Newman. Michelle and I both have our own business, and when life got in the way, Rita never once said, "This is too much for me to do." She just took the ball and ran with it, and answered the emails, and made the important questions, and made the important decisions, and we're so thankful to Rita. Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Pam. I think it was last August when Pam and Mike came to the Shepherdstown Rotary Club and talked about the conference, the national conference that you all had attended. And at that point in time, it was just really easy to think, what could we do to put a community grant together? And I think this is an ongoing venture that we have together, and I look forward to working with you all in the future as well. I would also like to take this opportunity to also have our club, Shepherdstown Club, stand up and be recognized and thanked as well. So if I could have a few of you guys. And I too want to take this time to say thank you, Rita. It has been incredibly very giving of you. Rita wasn't even a member. I think, when did you become a member of Rotary? In the last 2 months, hasn't it? So she has been working tirelessly from the beginning, behind the scenes, and she's actually involved with the anti-human trafficking group here on campus. And so because of that, she introduced us to Bob Leslie, who's one of our guest speakers and panelists. And that's how we got the ball rolling with what could we do with our community grant. And that's why you all are here, traveled across our great state to come here for tonight and for all-day training for tomorrow. So we thank you for taking the trek, whether it was from Huntington or Morgantown. We really appreciate you coming to the Eastern Panhandle, which is, I know, very far for many of you. So we thank you and we welcome you here. And again, I just want to take this opportunity to thank our speakers and our panelists. Katie, I know you've been on all of the conference calls as well. Nancy, your committee as well. So at this point, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce our guest speakers. So do you want to help me? I think, well, we have our first speaker who's going to be she's the author of she's Carol Hart Metzger, and she is the Facing the Monster of Human Trafficking. Her book is up here as well. And I think you all had met her at a conference, at a district conference, right?
I snuck into a room at one of the conferences, and there was Carol. And Carol is not this flashy go-getter and all over the stage and all loud. She's just this simple, quiet woman who delivered this message, and everybody stayed quiet. You could hear a pin drop. And I thought, okay, I like this woman. I think she can help us. So we actually invited her to our district conference, and she spoke there. And we just dropped off, I don't know, 500 or 600 pairs of socks in her car that we collected, because she gives socks to the ladies and men and children that have been trafficked, and it's just something that they don't have clean, dry socks. And so it was just amazing, and she's a wonderful lady, and I think her message is simple but powerful.
Then we have an incredible panel group, and we'll start off with J. Robert Leslie. Where's Bob? Is Bob in the back? There he is, all the way in the back. And he's the Senior Deputy Attorney General for the state of West Virginia. And like I said, Bob was the one that gave us this great idea to partner with Friss and Nancy Hoffman, so I appreciate it, Bob. Secondly, we have Katie Spriggs, who Katie's sitting up front. She's the Executive Director of the Shenandoah Women's Center, and you have 15 beds or 11 beds? 50, okay, and then you guys are trying to expand.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, and they're looking for property now to expand the women's shelter. So she's been an incredible resource and educator for all of us in this area. And then thirdly, we have Penny K. Hoflinger. She's a survivor, author, and founder of Coffee House Farm. And we've met you a couple of times, and we welcome you back to Shepherd University. And thank you for being here on our panel tonight. So that's it for now, and so we'll turn it over.
We'd like to have Carol come up.
Thank you. Oh, so you can hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'll see if I can live up to what they said about me. And I'll try not to get too excited so that I still dignify. I'm not going to stand behind the microphone over there because I like to be with people. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go off script. I wanted to just tell you a quick story about socks and the importance of what the Rotarians did, these hundreds and hundreds of pairs of socks. Years ago, the very first time I showed up to volunteer at a place called the Salvation Army's New Day Women's Drop-In Center, which was a place where women who are currently being commercially, sexually exploited, prostituted, sex trafficked, where these women could come in and get the simple basics of life. Whether it was a shower, food, they come in every single day with wounds. Last year, the drop-in center served 995 women. They need clothes, they need underwear. They can come in for all of these things, and there was quite a good number of women already there when I really, this was day one. I was offering microwave meals and doing some other things. Like, how can I help you? Do you need a bathroom? Because you sleep in an abandoned building where there isn't one. So a woman came in and she said, do you have any socks? Every other day of the year, we had socks. We happened to be out. I could offer her a meal. I could offer her a shirt. Everything, but we were out of socks that day. Another victim of human trafficking, another woman who probably also lived in an abandoned building or slept in an alley and had nothing but the clothes she wore on her body. Maybe one of those small grocery bags of personal toiletries, because this is what this life is like. This woman bent down, untied her shoes, and offered the socks off her feet to this woman who had come in asking for a pair. I learned more about compassion in that moment than probably any other moment and any other observation I had had in my entire life. Thank you to the Rotarians for now, what is it, something like 900 pairs of socks. Because if that woman came in tomorrow, another victim would not have to offer the socks off her feet. Tells you just a little bit about what life is like for these women. Can everyone see the slides? Can you see past me, Mike? Everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is a really, really important kickoff evening. Tomorrow, here, responders are going to be learning how to answer the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That is a really, really big deal. In fact, could I see the hands in the audience? Folks, how many of you are taking that training tomorrow? Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Can I see hands of Rotarians who made this evening and this week's training possible? Can I see hands? Thank you all again. And how about community members? Community members who care to be here also. We've got some of those too. Really commendable for you to be here because you have a part to play in all of this too. Let me show you why this evening and the training is so, so important. I don't know if you can see that from the back. Let me read you, bleeping out some of the words. Step 2, you need to get that B to do S she don't want to do. This can be anything, but it's better if it's sexual. I was working on another book about protecting children, working on it with a survivor named Anne-Marie Jones, who does allow me to use her name, by the way. Doing some research, this is a Facebook post I came across. This is real. It is violent. Violent. It is explicit. It is sexual. It is vile. It is awful. I called it in to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I let Facebook know. That was October. In April, the beginning of April, it was still there. New laws have passed in the US. And when I checked again at the very end of April, it was down. But how many people looked at this Facebook page before it was taken down? How many men, women, kids on the playground who want to sell other kids on the playground for sex? How many people found that and decided to use it? This is why this is so important, because you as a community will begin to understand When do we call the National Human Trafficking Hotline? Or when do we call 911? What can we do to help? Responders are going to be able to answer those questions and provide those solutions depending on where they are in the chain of those hotline responses. We've got a lot of work to do as a community, and this program is just one of those fabulous steps. So what is human trafficking? This is the definition. I invite all of you, if you really want to know the whole definition, go ahead and photograph it. I'm not going to go into all of the ways, the means, the purpose. We also have someone who probably, speaking later, who will probably be able to give you a really great definition of it and be able to explain that. But essentially, we're talking about being forced to commit an act of labor or forced to commit sex through force, fraud, or coercion, unless you are 18 years and younger. Younger than 18 years of age. If you're sold for sex, and you're younger than 18, that is sex trafficking. That's what I'm going to focus on for the next half hour, mostly because that is what I deal with every day. I consult to the Salvation Army's New Day to Stop Trafficking program. For 7 years, I have volunteered with female survivors of particularly sex trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation, and some labor trafficking. But here in the U.S., particularly the commercial sexual exploitation, the sex trafficking of females, is one of the top forms of human trafficking. Rather than simply giving you a lot of information about the definition, you don't have to be brought from someplace else. You don't have to be taken across state lines to be a victim. You can be a victim because you were sold by someone down the street. Leah is not her real name. I'm going to change a few of the details about her story, simply because she deserves her privacy too, her privacy and anonymity. Leah was 14 years old when all of a sudden both her parents were out of the picture. For some reason, she fell beneath the radar of social services and of school. No one seemed to notice that she went missing. She was lonely. She wasn't getting an education. She felt isolated. And she craved love. Oh, she wanted to be loved. To have a family just like everybody else. Kids are thinking that everybody else out there has the perfect family. A lovely house, 2-car garage, 2 parents, 1.5 siblings, galvanized trash cans out by the street, the wheelie bins. So she began chatting online with a guy who really seemed to take an interest in her. He listened. He really cared about what mattered to her. And one day she spilled the beans. She was pretty much on her own at 14 years old. She fell in love. He invited her out for a real date, really found out that she really was that alone, and was afraid of talking to any sort of law enforcement or the people that you and I, at least some of us, would trust most. Family, she had none. Law enforcement, she was afraid of. What would happen to her? Would they take her away? Would she have to go somewhere and live in a foster family? She'd certainly heard about what could happen in a foster family. And she was not a member of a church or other neighborhood groups. He promised her love. He was going to take care of her. She would sleep under his roof. He would feed her. Maybe one day they would get married and have a baby together. She fell for that hook, line, and sinker, and those promises dissolved almost within 24 hours. She was forced to take her own photos, nude, and post them. At that time, it was Backpage.com. Think of it as the Craigslist of adult entertainment. That site has now been closed by the feds, and the services have moved elsewhere. skipthegames.com and all sorts of other places. But she was posting nude photos of herself because he was violent. He was violent. She had a quota to make. He would choke her to make sure that she was not hiding money in the cavity of her body. In the cavity. He would beat her. He would slap her, to the point that she never knew when that was going to happen or when someone who was buying her was going to do the same thing. And she ended up with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, at about the same equivalent as a combat victim. This is actually pretty normal for a survivor of human trafficking. By the time she was 17, she had lived in an abandoned home where there was no heat, hot water, electricity. West Virginia gets cold, and so does Pennsylvania, where she came from. She had had food withheld as a way of forming a trauma bond. You guys heard of Stockholm Syndrome? I'm seeing a lot of heads. It's basically when you begin to identify or really form that bond with the person who is holding you captive, either psychologically or possibly physically. She also was developing a very strong bond with her trafficker. He would say, you may not come home until you have made $1,500. You don't get food until then. I don't know about you, but it's not easy for me to make $1,500 in a day. If you do make that much money, please come talk to me. I have some projects for you. The way it works, have any of you been without food for a medical issue for a while? How do you feel? How do you feel when you actually get food again, 24 hours later? Pretty darn good. Maybe Jell-O in the hospital, but it's looking pretty good at that point. You begin to feel, instead of those feelings of anxiousness, what am I going to eat? I'm really hungry, I'm getting physically uncomfortable. You begin to feel euphoria. That euphoria gets transferred to the person who gave you that food. So all of a sudden, she is beginning to feel euphoria. This man, this trafficker, has saved her life by giving her food. You guys will see the difficulty in this, and that he was also the one who took the food away. But the more immediate feeling was euphoria. This is what happens with trauma bonding. They also had a child, which can be fairly common with a trafficker and a victim of sex trafficking. She loves him. They're going to have a family together. She would never turn the father of her baby into law enforcement. She loves him. He's the one who says he's feeding their child. I did work once with a woman who said that she had a child with her trafficker. He threatened to rape her if she didn't, her child, her baby, if she didn't come back with enough money. I don't know about you guys, but I would have been out there. I would have done that too. To feed my child, to keep my child from being harmed. He did it anyway. He did it anyway. But this is what trauma bonding is. This is what human trafficking is. The average number of times someone is sold for sex per day, every single day of a year, or until that trafficker dies and leaves you, or until you are sold to another trafficker and then it happens again. Sex 10 to 15 times per day. 10 to 15 times per day. There are people out there who will say they're sex workers. This is a choice. It's an equal transaction, isn't it? No, it's not an equal transaction. there's violence, unwanted disease, unwanted pregnancy. It is not a choice in my book. The good news is that with Leah, she was recovered by law enforcement. Today, she is working on her GED, because remember, she missed school from age 14 to 18. Working on her GED, she had a job that she liked very much until she gave that up to go to school. She is doing reasonably well. Will it be a hard road for the rest of her life? Yes. She'll need to learn how to carry that trauma with her, to work with therapists, so that it's going to be manageable. She doesn't have to live that life and endure what she needs to anymore. This is good. This is a good thing. (11 to 14). 11 to 14. Kids should be learning at 11 to 14. They should be reading 4th grade mysteries. They should be playing soccer. They should be learning multiplication tables. How do you learn in school when all you can think about is the fact that someone has groomed you to be sold for sex? I think we as a society can do better than this. It has got to stop. If someone is younger than 18 and they're being sold for sex, they are a victim of sex trafficking. And it's time that we as a community work holistically to help end this. Again, this is what this program is about this week. Now time to put you guys to work. You've listened to a lot. Some of you are going to learn more tomorrow. I hope all of you choose to learn more. But here is just a small list of what you and your neighbors, your fellow Rotarians, your family members can do. Know the signs and who to call. All right, people will say, well, how do I know if I see a victim of sex trafficking? The answer is you might not. And you may not know for sure. No one has a sign on them that says, I am a victim. It's not like some of the posters that you see depicted. It is not just a skinny little white girl whose hands are in shackles. More likely, it is a person, any race, creed, color, boy, girl, LGBTQ, different ages too. The oldest woman I have ever worked with was 60 years old. 60 years old. So we have to simply start looking for red flags. Here are the indicators. Someone who is isolated. Maybe they're numbing other pain, previous sexual abuse. Or maybe being neglected. They're numbing through alcohol or drugs. Maybe they're disoriented. If all of you who are not from Shepherdstown were dropped behind a building in Shepherdstown, would you know where you were in the middle of the night? Probably not. If you're disoriented, you kind of don't know where exactly you are. You maybe don't even quite know what day it is. Big one. Over-sexualized teen girl with an older boyfriend and expensive gifts. Why does the girl seem a little bit tired than normal in school on a Monday? And why is she carrying a Michael Kors bag? Start asking questions if all of a sudden you find out that's because there's an older boyfriend. And by the way, this particular scenario of ending up in human trafficking, sex trafficking, is just one. There are almost as many stories as there are victims. But this one is called a Romeo pimp, Romeo trafficker. Signs of abuse. Have you seen signs of cutting? Is there a scar, maybe on the neck or under the hairline? Something that you might not notice easily. Keep your eyes open. We've been trained, I think, in today's society, let's not look too far from our own little corner. We don't want to be nosy. Hereby giving you permission, be just a little bit nosy tomorrow, wherever you are. We need people who care and will stick their necks out enough to be nosy. Brand tattoos. If you ever see someone who has a tattoo that is perhaps a barcode, a money bag, or a dollar sign, that's a big red flag. A lot of the women, and I should say men too perhaps, you may not recognize their ink as being different from anyone else's. But if someone's got a new tattoo, and maybe it doesn't look quite so professionally done, be interested. Hey, tell me about your ink. Looks new. What does it mean? Be interested. This is a picture of two tattoos from a real case in York, Pennsylvania. Situation where a guy named Paul Sewell, a trafficker, called himself God and put his brand or tattoo on every single one of the females that he trafficked. He gave them a different name, whether she was Diva, whether she was Jewel, and he branded them as God's Diva, God's Jewel, usually on the back of the neck, occasionally on the sleeve. Keep your eyes open for brands, tattoos. There may be a real fear of authority, as I told you with Leah. She was afraid. People have fears for different reasons. If it is someone from another area, maybe they're out of the country, maybe they're an immigrant, maybe they're here with proper documentation. There's fear of deportation, if that passport and visa are stolen. There's fear of authority. Maybe they have been harmed by a top member of a faith-based organization, or maybe by a member of law enforcement. We don't like to think about that happening, but the women I work with tell us it does happen. So they're fearful of authority. They're also afraid that if word gets back to a trafficker, they could end up dead. Side note, the average length of life, average lifespan of a person after formal entry into commercial sexual exploitation, 7 years. 7 years. As I said, I know some women who have survived until 60, but there are some who don't make it a day. A girl ends up with a really, really violent John, who is a consumer of sex, may not make it 24 hours. They may not identify as a victim. Again, you cannot simply ask a victim of human trafficking, are you being trafficked? Who brought you in? That's my boyfriend. How can you call him that? The bonds are very, very strong. This is why we have to reach out and we have to make inferences. And we have to ask the people in our community, all you folks who are taking the trafficking training tomorrow, ask them to do their jobs. They know how to do this. They know how to talk to survivors of all sorts of crimes. Ask for help. So here's your rule of thumb. Who to call after you've seen the signs, or maybe just a few of them. You will never know for certain. Guess what, folks? You don't have to know for certain. That's why we have law enforcement, and they do their proper jobs. If you ever see a child or anyone else in imminent danger, that's 911, yeah? You already know that. You already know that. If there is a situation where you're really not sure, and you just can't make heads or tails of the situation, National Human Trafficking Hotline. There are going to be people in this room who are trained to figure out how to deal with these situations that come through the hotline. So community members, it is your job. Take a photograph of that screen and memorize that hotline number. It is 888-3737. 888. If you question something, call it in. It can be anonymous if you want, or give them your name. They might just call you back and say, hey, did you happen to notice X, Y, or Z? Tell them what you saw. Give them every detail you can. They'll get to work. All right, your turn. All my fire drills are based on real scenarios, by the way. Your niece, who is a senior in high school, and you are searching online ads for a car for her. You stumble upon a pornographic ad for escort services by a girl who is a sophomore at her high school. What do you do? Your turn, folks. What do you do? That is a 911 call. Anyone want to, why is it 911? Under 18, and she has already been in danger. If she is being sold already for escort services, and you recognize a sophomore is usually, what, 15, 16 years old, somewhere in there. She is already in severe trouble. And when I say trouble, I don't mean she's doing something bad. I mean she is being harmed and she needs help. That's a 911 call. How do you deal with your niece? She's just seen something that's probably going to be really traumatic to her. What do you do? Don't make me call on you, I will. Thank you. Yeah. First of all, you can say, thanks, if you weren't in the room before, thanks for showing this to me. This is a pretty serious thing, isn't it? How do you feel about it? Wow. Does this shock you? Are you surprised? Let her parents or caregivers know that she's seen this. If she starts ruminating, there are people she can talk to, whether it is someone who is already on a hotline in one of your counties, whether it is a minister, someone a part of a faith-based organization. Maybe someone will refer her. Maybe she needs only 5 minutes of reassurance to say, you know what, this is being taken care of. Maybe she needs more. It will depend entirely on the individual. But take care of your niece and yourself too. What do you do about the website? Reporting, yep. You can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Let the police know, obviously they're going to do something. Report it to that website too. The same way I called, the same way I notified Facebook. Quick question. Would you guys take a photograph or a screenshot of the site that you saw? Some people say yes, some people say no. Actually, you're both right depending on what did the police say. I will tell you that it would be doing it just for evidence if the police say, hey, would you mind just taking a quick screenshot so that we can trace it in case we can't get there fast enough, in case in the 3 seconds between you see it and we start looking at it, it's taken down. So ask them, do you want me to do that? Interesting side note, I once was talking to, in my county where I live, the police do want you to take a screenshot of it. Now, if you have other pornographic, child porn material on your phone or your computer or whatever, you are subject to arrest. And I will help do that. But in my county, they say, yeah, take the photo. So I'll get your question in 1 second. I had a situation where one lady said, I don't know how to take a screenshot. And the lady next to her said, oh, Marge, don't worry. She said, there are 2 things you can do. But really, the most important one is, all you have to do is ask your niece. She'll know how to do it. Yes, ma'am, you have a question.
Yes, so the law changed recently here, so that means that sex trafficking itself, you can call the CPS hotline. The other thing is you can call the FBI Innocent Loss Initiative and report it, and they actually send a link, not a picture.
Link, not a picture. Thank you very much. Oh, and I should tell all of you who are mandated reporters, you know who you are, and you need to follow mandated reporting. Information that we just gave is that is for community members. Okay? So mandated reporters, you already know what to do. All right, so you need to learn how is your child or your student or whatever you're dealing with. How is your student using the computer or the phone? Because the internet is the new street corner. Real example. This came up after there was a girl and her mom who came up and said, we saw one of your programs and my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, was just sort of keeping her best friend's secret. She's 16 years old and sneaking out of her bedroom at night to meet a 28-year-old man and his friends, and they're partying in his apartment. We thought maybe that was, something more than just a boyfriend. Good for them. Got a hold of the detective. This was one of the things that came out of it, and that is like not Sarah's whole name. This was a site called Ask FM. There are loads and loads of websites out there. And they'll all be old by the time we walk out of this room, and there will be 16 new ones. But Sarah gets a message. An anonymous person says, damn, you're sexy. Does she say, get away from me? I don't know who you are. You could be a 45-year-old woman who wants to sell me to all the men in her neighborhood, or it can be an older man. She says, thanks, means tons. We need to know what our kids are doing. Okay, I'm not going to test you on these, but if you can identify all of these icons for applications, social media apps, will you raise your hand? 6 of them. Oh, this is like the best group ever. The first time I've ever met a group that had like more than maybe one person go, well, I know 5. Congratulations. And as I said, these may be really, really old, like by 9 o'clock tonight, but know them. So here's what they are. The first one is WhatsApp. A lot of you probably know that one. You can call, especially Rotarians. You can call the Rotarian in England, and it's going through the internet, so it's IP-based, so you don't pay fees. Okay. The difficulty is that you don't know who your kid is calling and where. There was a big case between California and New York not so long ago, where, like within the past couple of months, where kids, these 2 girls were communicating with this guy who's going to turn them into models in New York City. They were in California. And they actually used a different one. They used Snapchat, but they could have used WhatsApp if they had wanted to for calling. A situation where he was going to turn them into a big movie stars. They were going to be models. They showed up, these 2 girls, and I want to say, they were young teens. They showed up at the airport with no luggage. I want to say first-class tickets and no parental permission. Their parents did not even know they were there, which sometimes parents don't. This stuff can happen fast. I'm not blaming parents, but I am saying, folks, let's pay attention, and let's be really vigilant. So it was the gate agent who said, okay, I think something's wrong. She called the deputy of that particular precinct, whatever. That's what WhatsApp can do. Facebook. It is not cool if you're 13-year-olds, to be on Facebook, and you have to be 13 years, of age or older. But that doesn't mean there isn't going to be someone out there who does it. And Facebook can be linked to other applications that kids are part of. And as I showed you this evening, at least at one point, you could get an instructional guide, a playbook for breaking and selling girls on Facebook. So at least know what's on the kid's phone. Whisper for anonymous confessions. Kids may share vulnerabilities. Let me give you an example. A kid who is being bullied and is afraid to talk to parents. Or a kid who has maybe sexted someone and now it's being spread around the school. Okay? This person says on Whisper, I'm really feeling bad about this. Oh my gosh. And I just don't have anyone to talk to. Watch out for the person with big ears who's listening and showing that they care and saying it's okay. Because that is a space where traffickers have groomed kids. They have exploited those vulnerabilities and groomed the kids for sex trafficking. Snapchat, of course, you can use it for sexting. You can save the screenshots, even though they sort of disappear. You can still take a screenshot of it. It can be used, the porn sex can be used for blackmail by other kids. Kick account, really scary. Messages and photos disappear, and they're untraceable, at least by the person on the phone, or perhaps even the parent who is looking at the child's face as she's looking at this phone. A look of horror comes across her face. The kid clicks something and it's gone. They just disappear. So know that one. It's really hard to monitor, and ages, like so many of these, are unverified. Musically, kids make videos with music. That's really cool. I mean, adults do too. But wait until, all of a sudden it involves stripping and it goes viral. The other thing is, with all of these, kids are so smart, so smart. They learn how to get past all of the filters. If you don't know what, you can look this up, T-H-O-T, thought. If you don't know what that means, it's time to go to urbandictionary.com. Some of you know what it means. You're just like, ooh. Yeah, so pop in there to find out. Here's what the DA in my county does. He has a 14-year-old daughter with a cell phone, and he says, there's lots of stuff that's dangerous out there. He says, you know what? You're allowed to download pretty much whatever social media app you want on your phone. He said, but here's the deal. I am also going to become a member of that same group. Whatever app you put on your phone is going on mine. And you're going to friend me, or whatever it's called with that. We're going to do that. And at any given moment of any day, I have the right to pick up your phone and take a look at everything that's being said, or to check in with your account. He says you can't look at it every moment of every day, but it's a good deterrent. The truth is, when parents do things like that, where they say, yeah, I trust you, but I don't trust the rest of the world, so I'm going to check in. Those kids are going to have some troubles. They got someone watching out, so there's a safety net. A safety net that's probably pretty quick. All right, spread the word. Please, every single one of you, find someone tomorrow and say, it is not okay to buy sex. The truth is, the hotline is amazing. But wouldn't we really rather not have to use the hotline because kids were safe? Why wait until they're victims with PTSD and wounds and tattoos that have to be removed because they're ashamed? Get rid of the $99 billion demand for paid sex, and we're going to take care of quite a lot of the problem. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry worldwide, $150 billion. If you don't understand that, neither do I. But essentially, what that is that is more than Coca-Cola, Nike, and Starbucks make in a year combined. If you do understand, because you have that much money, again, I really need you to come talk to me. So do Rotarians. Okay, here's your last fire drill. You notice that a spa at a nearby shopping center is rarely full during the day, but has lots of cars on Friday nights. The blinds are usually closed, and you notice outward-facing security blinds. One day, you see two females accompanied by two men going in, but you don't ever see them come out. Clients seem to be males. What do?
Hotline.
Call the hotline. Thank you very much. And that number is? Good, guys. So I told you these are all based on true stories, and I'm going to leave you with one last story. That is, so my husband's family is this large, really happy, jovial group of people. And they pretty much learned that they should not ask me how work is going, particularly if it's, I've been spending it all day with a client who's really had some difficulties. You don't ask me how work is unless you want the truth. So, Easter dinner 3 years ago, My niece, who's an adult now, says, Aunt Carol, how's work? And the whole family goes like this. Mr. Dinner forgot that. So I told her, and I said, well, one of the really interesting things about this week was someone asked me if I would just drive by a particular spa just like this, and to just see if I thought maybe there was possibility that it wasn't just a spa, possibility of commercial sexual exploitation going on with it. I said, well, Chris, what does this look like? She described exactly that. I said, yeah, I'm thinking so. Want me to come by and take a look with you? So I did. Doggone. Yep, looked exactly like that. And so I gave her the hotline number. I also put her in touch with her local county coalition against human trafficking. And I also said, if you'd like, call your local police. See what they have to say about this also. And give them all the information, you just told me. All the same information. So she calls and she does all this stuff. And I get a call about 2 months later, and she says, Aunt Carol, what a waste of time that was. I can't believe you made me do all that stuff. And it is still going on. She said, in my yoga studio, she said, last week a guy walked in and he said, wow, ladies, I wasn't expecting it to look like a yoga studio. They were horrified. They were horrified. I said, Chris, here's the great thing about our nation. Someone can't just say that you're doing something, police automatically come in, break the door down, and arrest you for something. There has to be an investigation, okay? We are innocent until proven guilty. I said, they could be doing their investigating. Maybe they're going to do a sting. They're not going to tell you. They are doing their job, and you need to let them. She's willful. She does not take advantage. So I said, give it a little more time. She calls me back in a week and says, now I'm really irritated. Now you wasted my call, not just a couple weeks ago. Now you wasted last week's call. And she was not pleased. I said, Chris, I'm sorry. Sometimes things don't work out the way I want them to in this world of human trafficking. They're getting better, I promise. Let me think about this one. 24 hours later, she calls me back and said, Aunt Carol, they shut down a prostitution ring in the building yesterday, last night after we talked. So, here's the moral of this story. One, what you do, whether you're answering the hotline calls and providing those solutions, whether you are Rotarians, raising money so these wonderful things can happen, whether you're the community person who is helping the Rotarians or helping all these people up here. Wait till you talk to these people. They're cool. They're doing great things. All these things matter. You can help end this problem. The second moral to this story is you really can talk about this at the dinner table, and you will eventually, when people find out what good can come of it, you will get invited back. Please share everything that you learned tonight and this week with other people. Everything. Learn more. This is not a selfless, big promotion toward my book, but buy a copy, learn something, share it, give it to the library. The royalties get used for anti-human trafficking projects. Support some of the people in this room who are doing great things because we are a community. Do you guys know what happens when a kid is lost at the beach? So they put a line of people and they link arms and they walk through the surf until that child is found. I'm asking you tonight, metaphorically, link arms as a community, and we will find those kids, we will find the adults, and we will make a difference. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your ears.
So now we're going to have our panelists come up, please. And they're just going to tell us a little bit about what they do and where they are with the anti-human trafficking program. And then we're going to have Q&A, and I'll introduce Rachel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Come on up.
Real quick. Put your head down.
So we're winging it just a little. And if anyone knows me, I didn't even have a cell phone 6 years ago. And now I feel like those kids that they don't use papers anymore. They go, oh, wait 1 minute, I've got the Bible on here. Or wait 1 minute, I've got what's going on here. So I think I can do this. So Rachel Meads is the Director of Student Activities and Leadership, who truly is the heart of campus life, and recently received the 2018 Phenomenal Woman Award. Rachel also teaches in the Appalachian Studies Department and has a big heart for all things West Virginia. She's been the encourager and the strongest supporter of our anti-human trafficking task force since its small beginning. Rachel is a woman of action who brings out the best in others. So will we please give Rachel a big round of applause?
Wow, I'm just here to be the moderator. That was a really nice introduction. Thank you, both of you. All right, so on behalf of Shepherd University, thank you for being here. And we're so glad to see so many guests that have come from out of town, especially our FRIS counselors for tomorrow doing training here. We hope you enjoy it here. We hope you enjoy the town and the experience that you have. But I'm really grateful that you invested the time in coming to be part of this experience. And thank you once again, especially to Rotary, for all of your support and for making it possible for this training to happen. All right, so we have a wonderful panel up here, and I have had the good fortune of getting to be part of panels with all of these folks before. And I'm going to allow them to please ask if you'd introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what it is that you do in the community and what roles you play, because each of these folks has a very different kind of role in our community in regards to stopping human trafficking and raising awareness. Our first panelist is going to be giving you sort of his approach from the legal side of the house and talk about some of the exciting things that are happening here. So I'm going to start with Bob Leslie. And you can give him a big round of applause.
Thank you all very much. As said, my name is Bob Leslie. I'm Senior Deputy Attorney General for the state of West Virginia. My role with regard to human trafficking started a few years ago, and it's sort of how I got into it is I actually saw a movie at church that dealt with human trafficking, and then a few weeks later they were looking for someone in the office to formulate our response to trafficking, and my hand shot in the air. And then I realized my hand was the only one that was in the air, and therefore I was selected. But that's fine, because even if they'd all gone up, I would have fought each and every one of them for it. So over the course of the last 2 years or so, I began formulating what our office's response is going to be. Attorney General Morrissey, and working with the opioid crisis, started learning about, of all things, drug-addicted parents that are selling their own children to supply their habit. And if you think it doesn't happen in the state of West Virginia, we found a 12-year-old 2 weeks ago. So it does happen here. With that said, we wanted to do something for trafficking, and we thought the best way that we could affect, as a force multiplier in the state of West Virginia, a response to human trafficking was to begin training law enforcement officers. We have then we developed and instituted a curriculum for LEPS approved law enforcement training. That's the Law Enforcement Professional Standards Board. And over the course of the last year, actually we're just coming up on a year, we have trained, I've trained probably 500 certified police officers in the state of West Virginia on how to recognize and then how to respond to human trafficking. In addition to that, we've been conducting training for CPS workers. Right after Secretary Crouch was named the Cabinet Secretary, Head of Department of Health and Human Resources, Brian Morris, who many of you will meet tomorrow, and I went over and met with Secretary Crouch. He gave us 15 minutes. We scared him to death over the course of that 15 minutes, and we wound up spending an hour and a half with him. Thereafter, we were training all of the CPS workers as well. So predominantly what my role has been training. And like I said, it's been a humbling experience. I've got to meet some fantastic people across the state and see other folks who actually have their feet on the ground and the effects that they have. So I know that this training is going to be a big force multiplier for you as well. But thank you.
I figured there was going to be another applause, so I waited a second. I'm Katie Spriggs. I'm the Executive Director of Shenandoah Women's Center. We're the local domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. It gets longer. I have to take a breath. Service provider in the area. We serve Berkeley, Morgan, and Jefferson counties. 2 shout-outs. First, I'm a graduate of Shepherd. Yeah. I absolutely love this school. And I am a product. I started my job at SWC as a FRIZ-funded rural advocate. So I'm a product of Shepherd and a Frizz. So feels like it's all coming full circle. So at SWC, well, first I'd like to throw one thing out there about us. We're changing our name. So if you're thinking it's about time, I'm with you. It's been 41 years with this name, and we've done a lot of great work under this name, but we serve more than women, and so I think it's about time that our name says that we do. So I just tell everyone that because I don't want to lose us in the switch, so just keep your ears open for that name. It'll launch in October. But we got, as an agency, into the world of trafficking in 2012. I was an intern at Shepherd University, from the university, at SWC, and we got a call from Polaris, the national hotline, and they said, we have a victim of sex trafficking. She was in her mid-30s who is going to be trafficked into Martinsburg this weekend. Can you take her into your shelter? We operated basically just a domestic violence shelter at the time, and it was still growing into what it is now, and I kind of just said yes, because I was an intern, and I said yes to everything. And we didn't really know, right? That's how I became executive director, just say yes all the way up. We didn't really know what we were doing. We had really no idea. It was still, to this day, the longest it has ever taken me to get someone out of a situation. It took 13 good hours on a Saturday, working the hotline to get her out and to get her into our shelter, and then she was absolutely nothing like what I was expecting. And Polaris had said, they had told me on the phone, this is actually odd, we don't usually call programs that we haven't verified. We were desperate. There were a plentiful amount of reasons why she couldn't go to law enforcement, and so I was like, well, I'm glad you called us, because we've got this. We didn't have it. Update. We did not have it. When I finally called them and told them she was there, she was safe, they were like, well, if you need us, if you need help, call us back. And I'm like, oh, case management, crisis, this is us, this is what we do, we got this. It took, I think, like 3.5 minutes of meeting with her for me to realize I needed to call them back. So from there, we really sat down and as a staff, and we kind of talked about it, and we realized that, number one, it's happening in our area. That was an extreme case of gang-controlled sex trafficking that was in our face. It was obviously trafficking. So we were like, if it's that obvious, how many are we missing that are not as obvious? And if no one else is going to do this, we are. So we took our little tiny, referenced earlier, 15-bed shelter in Martinsburg that was already bursting, and we just put some more stress on it. So we're also going to launch a campaign in the fall to build a bigger facility. So if you're thinking it's about time, so am I, trust me. We have 21 people in a 15-bed shelter right now. I'm thinking it too. So from there, we realized there weren't a lot of resources at that time, a lot of trainings for us, so we did our own research. We brought Polaris in and asked them to train us. They did. They were gracious enough to come train us multiple times to answer all of our questions. And then we've just tried to be a voice statewide to really push this victimization into other service providers, because I gotta tell you, the FRIZ funded programs and FRIZ itself is the best that there is. And so if anybody can do this, they can, and they will. And they're gonna learn how tomorrow. And they've been learning how. This is the final part of a 4-part series of trainings. So this has been ongoing for a couple of months, and we're happy to see it not come to a close, but we're happy to see our 4th part finally make it here. And also, I just have to throw this out there, travel to Charleston like every day, I feel like, pretty much all the time. So welcome to the Panhandle, the people who had to travel far, far, far away. It's nice to see you here, and you know what, I only drove 15 minutes to get here. This never happens. First time ever. I will pass the mic.
Hello, I'm Penny K. Hofminger. I'm founder of Coffee Cost Farm. I'm a survivor of human trafficking. And also, I have a big heart, and I know that education is where it's at. I never told that secret for a long time. I never shared with people until 2011, when I was online getting my master's in finances, and an ad popped up for Polaris and talked about human trafficking. So from that point on, I started opening my mouth and telling people who I am and what I do. In 2012, I drove from Martinsburg, West Virginia, clear down into Georgia, where my granddaughter was taken by her mom up to there. She was trafficked in Sarasota. It was a major snowstorm, and when I went down there, I got her, and I thought to myself, trafficker, get in my face, because you won't come back, because I will literally annihilate you, because I know what it's like to be trafficked. So I brought my granddaughter, I left her phone with her mom, and I brought her to Martinsburg, West Virginia, and she stayed with me for a year, and we went through, and I'm grandma, so we had some major fights as grandma and granddaughter, okay? But she's back in Sarasota. She is clean off from the drugs. She is not in trafficking anymore. She's one of my advocates in Florida, and she is teaching about trafficking. Her friend Kirsten, and they told me I can use their names, okay? Kirsten come out of Arizona, and the reason I'm telling you these stories is that I want you to understand the passion I have in my heart and why I fight every day to educate in our community, in our state. She come out of Arizona. Kirsten was sold through Craigslist, and so she also stayed with me for that year. Both of them are in Sarasota, Florida. Both of them are doing good. Both of them, and both families have said thank you to me. The reason that I have such a passion, I was sexually abused when I was 6 years old, and that you will find that that's very common with people that have been trafficked. They have been sexually abused. I was raped on a school ground in Thermopolis, Wyoming. I'm from Wyoming, and the judge, when I stood in front of him, he told me I was a bad little girl. And from that point on, I didn't have any self-worth. So one of the things that was happening to me was, who cared? Nobody really cared. And so when I ran into my first husband, which was my first trafficker at 16, he was a good-looking cowboy, and I fell for everything that he said. I ended up marrying him. I ended up having 3 children by him. He sold me in the bars so that he could drink and buy brand new Western shirts and Levi's and boots and hats because of the Western of Wyoming. And he took my clothes and tore them all up and took me to the city dump and said, find your clothes. I know what it's like not to have food because of the money that I ended up earning, because when he sold me at the bars, they would come and I got beat. If I had sex with the men, I got beat if I didn't have sex. I do have scars on my body where he put knives in me. And through those 3 children, because of what happens in that world of being trafficked and nobody really cares, my best girlfriend ended up giving my 3 children, they were 4, 3, and 1, to the Natroney County Welfare in Casper, Wyoming. That director happened to be into black marketing. He sold my children for $150,000. I never saw them for 18 years. They found me. And the reason, and that's why I have such a passion. I'm out here on the streets. I don't care where I am. I talk human trafficking. There's a workbook that my friend Sylvia helped me put together, and it's up there, and you guys can have a copy of it. Many people have already got a copy of it, but it is part of my life of how I was groomed. And there's a lot of, I'm not going to go into all of that, but what I want you to know is education's where it's at. And then the other thing is, take the blinders off. Really look at your neighbors. Really look at what's going on. Know who's who. And care. Just care. The one thing that helped me, the people that helped me to get out of the traffic situation was the compassion caring. They just cared for me. They really cared for me. And that's where I'm at. And yes, I understand the opiate crisis. I stuck a needle in my arm and shot heroin because that was a way of dealing with. And then sometimes it wasn't just 15, 20 men in a day. It was a lot more than that. I know. And that's why I do what I do. We take that workbook and we do a play. We do a live play. Because one of the things that I have come to understand is if you see it in a play, you really feel the trauma. And you know, because they don't actually hit my face, but when the little kid that's playing the trafficker in the play, when he hits his hand and I jerk, you feel that pain. And right now, so we do plays. We did one here in Shepherdstown, right over here at the Reynolds Hall in January. That was our first play from that workbook. And we've done at Covenant Baptist Church here. We did the play. We did one in Arden Methodist in Inwood. We are in the process of taking that play and turning it into a ballet. In October, we plan on doing a grand thing of the ballet to show it in a ballet part. And this is my legacy. I am looking at opening a dinner theater, okay, and from that dinner theater, those funds will fund a farm for young men and a farm for young women that have been abused, that are coming out of not just trafficking, but out of other situations too. And one of the things is that I know that each time that I talk and I go through what I have to go through, and that to share my story. But I do know that there was a time in Florida when they put a gun in my young son's mouth and said, if you do not do these men, we will blow his head off. And I did what they told me to do. And one of the things when you're talking about trauma, you have to understand that when a mother is fighting for her children or fighting for her own salvation, that she will do whatever. And there is something about being able to walk through that. They wanted me to tell you what I'm doing. I guess I have. I'm doing plays. I did a card game. I go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in June to sign the papers. And it's called Avoiding the Octopus. It's a card game that people can play. And it's a game that shows how to get someone out of trafficking or to make sure they don't get in trafficking. And it will be on the market and it will be sold as a card game where that game, people can just take it and play anywhere with it, and that funds will help with the farms. I am in therapy. I will admit, I will tell you that. I have a therapist that I go to every 2 weeks, and I have for years. And after I talk here tonight, yes, I've already have my appointment set because, as we say in our world, I've got to take a shower because there is a lot of stuff that churns inside of me, and I've got to be able to sit with somebody that knows me, understands me, and to do that. So anyway, I guess they said 10 minutes, and I think I've talked 10 minutes, okay? So, but this is who I am, okay? Thank you.
So, you can see we have a fantastic panel with lots of different perspectives and lots of different resources that they can offer you. And we've only just started to scratch the surface. I mean, we could do a teach-in on this for weeks, right? This is not something that we're gonna have the answer in 2 seconds. But you have a unique opportunity right now to ask questions. So I hope that you've been holding those in your head and been thinking about them as you've been listening tonight. So I am looking for you to give me your burning questions. And I'm gonna pretend that I'm Phil Donahue. For those of you who are under the age of 30, you probably don't even know who that is. But I'm gonna run up and down the aisles and let you ask some questions. So who has a burning question that you would like to ask? I've been practicing this, thank you. I'm practicing my Phil Donahue. Can't let me down.
Not that odd of a question, but Katie, you said FRIZ, what does that stand for?
Foundation for Rape Information and Services.
Foundation for Rape Information and Services, correct? And can you explain a little bit about what FRIZ counselors do?
So imagine, we really have two funnels of services in the state right now. We have like a domestic violence stream and a rape crisis center, sexual assault stream. Some programs throughout the state do both. They're considered dual centers. That's what we are. We do both. So there's a statewide domestic violence task force that the U.S. Attorney's Office has organized. And that task force has been working since 2015 to make a lot of decisions for how services will be provided, trainings will be provided, policy, all kinds of work like that. And the thing that that task force decided for services was that rape crisis centers specifically will handle sex trafficking cases because we already operate a 24-hour hotline. You can't be a rape crisis center in West Virginia without having a 24-hour hotline. And we respond to hospitals 24/7. So rape crisis centers will handle sex trafficking cases, and FRIZ is the statewide resource for sexual assault services in West Virginia. So they are a pass-through grant funding service for us too, so they hold some grants for us and pass that money down to all the centers who do the work on a local level. So FRIZ is really, they keep us sane, organized, they're our resource. Any sexual assault question we have, we go to them. And they provide lots of trainings. Trainings is what they do. How many did you provide last year? 44. Yeah. So this is just one in a million for them. But that's what they do, statewide.
Gotcha.
We're just gonna use this.
All right,
We don't wanna
Gotcha.
go like-
Yeah.
coming back here to the gentleman who has a question. There you go. Go for it.
Carol, could you share how Leah got out?
Microphone.
I'm not sure of all the details, what sort of, there wasn't time to go into all of her case. She was found by law enforcement on Backpage.com. They brought in an expert and someone said, yeah, this is not an adult who says she wants to do this. She is a juvenile, so they brought her in. She ran when she was about to turn 18 because she was afraid when she was ready to age out of Child Protective Services. She didn't know what was going to happen to her. So she ran and ended up with another trafficker, but they already knew kind of where to look for her and what the signs were. They actually found her on Backpage again. So again, it was a situation where law enforcement, it's kind of like a sting where they went in and said, okay, they posed as buyers and they found her and brought her out. I mean, obviously they didn't do anything, they didn't truly buy her, but that's how they found her.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up to that one?
I do. So you said that it's under 18 with consent or something like that, but why, if it's not consent, why not over 18? What's the?
Okay, so if you're younger than 18 years old, no matter what, it is sex trafficking if you're sold for sex, by law. If you're older than 18, then depending on what the law is in a state, and of course federal law, you have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. Without getting into a lot of detail, and maybe Bob, you might want to answer some of this, particularly with respect to West Virginia, it really gets my back up when a kid has been, groomed and sold from the time she's, average age 11 to 14, so 6 years old, 14 years old. Well, what if she's like 17 years old and she turns, her birthday is 18? She has to prove force, fraud, or coercion in order to make that a case of sex trafficking instead of her being arrested for prostitution. It's a problem. We're working on that one too, but that's the deal.
Bob, do you
Yeah, Bob, can you follow up on that one?
Certainly. The microphone is down here. All right, so in the state of West Virginia, any person under the age of 18 who is engaging in commercial sex, and that is basically sex for which something of value is traded. It doesn't have to be $1. It can be an item. It can be paying the power bill. It can be food for the table. But when a person under the age of 18 is engaging in commercial sex or is being engaged in commercial sex, that is human trafficking. Obviously, I believe it would be in poor taste, but the age of consent in the state of West Virginia is 16. That does not apply to a case of human trafficking. When there is the commercial aspect that's put in there, under the age of 18, commercial sex, you do not have to show fraud, force, or coercion.
Thank you. This side of the room, maybe. Burning questions over here, coming to you.
There you go.
In the shelter, are there children? Do some of the trafficked women have children that also come to the shelter?
Yes. We're usually about half and half, adults and children. We're overrun with children right now, so it's a small little push if anyone has any boys' clothing. We're in desperate need. But yeah, it's about half and half. Sometimes they come and she was just being trafficked and has children. Sometimes they were being trafficked also. We can't provide shelter to children who are not emancipated right now, so they can't come in without a guardian unless they've been emancipated. But there are children's shelters in the area that could do that.
Go ahead.
What's the age of emancipation? Is it still 16?
Yeah, I think you have to be 16 to get emancipated.
Thank you.
And I will, just a note on we were talking about child, when the West Virginia law was updated last legislative session, it was a significant update, and the one other thing that it did that's pretty significant is it added trafficking to the definition of an abused or neglected child, and the guidelines for an abused and neglected child within the CPS reporting system, the guideline actually says with or without money. So even if it didn't benefit, so even if it might not, God forbid, someone selling their kid for nothing, so they're not making any money out of it, they still are considered an abused or neglected child in West Virginia code now. So that was a significant addition to the code.
This question would,
All of them.
this question would be for either Penny or Carol. If we're out in public, is there a way to identify someone who we might believe would be a sex trafficking victim at a restaurant or something similar to that?
Yes, it's very much, and when I'm out teaching, this is one of the things I teach. If you're going into a restaurant and you order food, one of the things I always teach is start making contact with your waiter or waitress. Talk to them, get them to tell you, are they in school? Get eye contact. If they don't do eye contact and they just kind of serve you and go away, because one of the things that happens is traffic victims are in plain sight, and that happens and people aren't paying any attention. They just think that a waiter or waitress is rude. So I'm always teaching that, to bring that. In New Jersey, there was a sandwich shop that people was going in and getting their sandwiches for lunch, and there was this group of people that went to a training on human trafficking. So when they went in, they started asking, questions to the people behind the counter, and nobody was really looking at them or answering them. And one of the things was, so they called the hotline and the police come, and those people were trafficked and they were working at that sandwich shop. They were sleeping downstairs on mattresses that weren't A-okay, and they were getting $1 a day, and the person that owned the shop took that money. That story comes off from the FBI website, and that happens. I worked at Burger King in Martinsburg, West Virginia. One of the things was, and I can tell this story, there was a cook there 2 years ago, and she has some children. She also had a drug problem, and they were going to turn her lights and her water off, and she's talking to another cook, and saying that there was a gentleman down that was a neighbor in her neighborhood, and said, hey, those ads about taking pictures of those babies, they pay $500. Let me take pictures of your little daughter, and we'll send it in, and I will give you the $500 up front so that you can get your lights and your water on. And when I heard that, when I am out there advocating, I get real graphic. I don't pull no punches, I don't sugarcoat nothing, and I told her, this is what's gonna happen. Now, it's your choice. This was on a Tuesday. I said, it's your choice. And whatever you do, you have to live with it. I did not work on Wednesday. I come back to work on Thursday. She was working. She says, Miss Penny, I have no water, no lights. And I said, yeah, but you still have a daughter. And that she is on the West Coast now. And I'm really excited because she is 43 days straight off from heroin, and her whole family's out there with her children and helping her in the whole works. But if I wouldn't have opened my mouth, if I wouldn't have listened with my ears it would have been a whole different scenario. The Snapchat is so prevalent. When I did the play over here at Covenant, I said something and there was a young girl sitting right there in front, and then also at Arden Methodist Church, I did the same thing and Snapchat, and those kids, they knew what I was talking about. I didn't grow up with computers, but hello, I knew what's happening, you know? You just take that picture and wham, and I said, you know what? It goes away in 30 seconds? But somebody out there can find it. And I do know that there's a gentleman right now that is fighting for his career in West Virginia because he ended up in an affair and they had taken pictures of him and they put it up on pornography sites, okay? And that is happening now. So open your mouth, look. If something doesn't look right, in my workbook we have a little page that says if it looks fishy, it's probably fishy. Call, and everything. So
We talk about that too at Shepherd a lot when we've done our trainings with our student leaders. We talk about the same thing, that idea that everybody has a spider sense. We all have that feeling in your gut, and you have to just learn to trust that feeling in your gut because it's there for a reason. And that if we listen to that more often, we probably would avoid, getting into these situations sometimes where we're like not listening and we're saying, oh no, it's nothing. Oh no, it's just me. It must be in my head. And I think that that's one of the dangers is when we just sort of dismiss those voices. So I really appreciate, and I love it when Penny tells that story because I think that see something, say something, you get your spider sense, you open it up and say it. Sometimes people may feel like that's being intrusive, but it's better to be honest, I think, and intrusive than to not say anything and let something bad happen.
Can I just add something to that? I so love that spidey sense and intuition. So I'll tell you, the first couple of times I called the National Human Trafficking Hotline, I was shaken like a leaf. Am I doing the right thing? Blah, blah, blah. And I do this every, I don't call the hotline every day, but in my line of work, I deal with survivors. So yes, you're gonna feel shaky because maybe you've seen something that doesn't feel right. Please go with your gut. I once was talking to a group of people and I was saying, please just call. What if we're wrong? Don't worry about being wrong. That's not your job. You're not the one to have to discern that. You just call and be the eyes and ears for law enforcement. A guy stood up and he said, my brother's a cop. And he said, my brother always says, I would rather go to a family and say, I am really sorry for disturbing you and sort of turning your life upside down for a little while we were investigating something. He said, I'd much rather say, I'm sorry, and have to go to the door of a family and say, I'm really sorry to have to tell you your child is no longer alive.
Other questions? Oh, here I come. And then I'm coming right back to you, Rita.
All right, my question's for Bob Leslie. How often are human trafficking victims and this is actually, I don't know if Carol, you realized you did this during your presentation, but you said, Aunt Carol, they came and they shut down the prostitution ring. So how often are human trafficking victims being prosecuted for prostitution in West Virginia?
Good question. I don't know, is the short answer to that question. And it gets down to the individual charging officer, the prosecutor, the magistrates that have to appear before those sorts of things. What I can tell you is Homeland Security in conjunction with the Cabell County Sheriff's Department, Huntington Police Department ran a human trafficking sting back in December. And it was like any other sting that you would see on television. There were 4 rooms at a hotel. We had a command center. We had the room where the young lady who would be approached through Backpage would show up. Adjacent to that is a room that connected with the team of officers that would go in and place her in custody. And then the most important, critical part of that was an interview room. And I call it an interview room, which is the terminology they use as opposed to an interrogation room. Interrogation room, you arrest somebody, you take them to the interrogation room, and you basically try to get them to confess to committing a crime so that you can use it to prosecute. This is an interview room. Instead of going into that room and meeting with law enforcement officers who were trying to put them in jail, they went in and met with victims advocates. And the questions were more of, is somebody making you do this against your will? You know, how did you get here? You know, do you have an addiction problem that needs assistance? Do you have, now, there were several people, and understand, this sting went from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And in Huntington, West Virginia, they set them up on 15-minute increments. And every 15 minutes, there was another girl knocking on that door. And there was actually a time or two when they hadn't even completed the arrest on the first one, and the next one's coming up. So there were a lot of young ladies that were through that night. The ones that freely admitted, no, I'm doing this for my own reasons, they got a citation. They didn't get the perp walk. They got a citation because they are committing a crime. The ones that asked for help, though, were not arrested, but instead were given assistance and help. In fact, midnight that night, a federal victims advocate and I drove one of the young ladies, and when I first saw her, the first thing that went through my mind was, oh dear God, I hope she is over the age of 18. She was actually 24, but you would not know it by looking at her. We drove her that night and got her into a detox program for her heroin. She then went on into substance abuse training. And the interesting thing about that was she only had the clothes that were on her back. Her trafficker boyfriend, who was making her sleep with 7 guys a night just to keep herself in enough heroin, and him in enough heroin to be high, and her in enough heroin so that she wouldn't get sick, he wouldn't bring her anything. So the police officers that were involved, the sheriff's deputies that were involved, the federal agents that were involved, literally passed a hat around the room, and after we dropped her off at the treatment program, I believe it was 11:45 p.m. shopping spree at Walmart, and we went out and bought her some clothes and some personal essentials and stuff so that she could, change clothes. Back to your question, I don't know. Currently, statistics are not being kept on that. There are immunities if a person is under the age of 18 in West Virginia law. By legal definition, they are not a prostitute. They're under the age of 18. By legal definition in the state of West Virginia, if they're under the age of 18, they are crime victims. I have worked hard over the course of last year to scrub the term teenage prostitute out of my mouth. I don't use that term anymore, and I encourage others to not use that term as well, because they are not prostitutes, they are victims.
So it was actually very insightful. Yes, I did say prostitution ring, and yes, I have to say prostitution ring. I don't like to say it, but at that time, Pennsylvania did not have a comprehensive anti-human trafficking law. And because it was, it did the full thing, and it really was, that was what it was called on the books. It was prostitution ring. I am not allowed to call it a sex trafficking ring. They were adults. This is what it is on the law books. And sometimes even I have to really abide by the language of the law, or I could be sued, because by the law, they are not sex traffickers. It's very sad.
But I was going to say, as a follow-up, you obviously learned that there was trafficking going on, and you heard about the traffickers. When the person doing the trafficking is finally arrested, why are the charges that are brought against that person contributing to the delinquency of a minor rather than human trafficking?
Again, a charging officer is going to write the warrant the way the charging officer knows how to write it. Which is one of the reasons why we work so hard to train officers across the state and open their eyes to this new crime. The next thing is, as far as prosecutorial privilege or prosecutorial control, then goes to the elected prosecutor in that county. Now, a lot of the prosecutors have not been trained yet on recognizing, responding to trafficking. And in fact, 3 weeks from now, the West Virginia Prosecuting Attorneys Institute is holding its summer meeting, and I'll be there with a 4-hour session with the prosecutors, one half of the day, and then a 4-hour session with the key personnel in the office, victims advocates, et cetera, investigators, the second half of the day. West Virginia's law on human trafficking is brand spanking new. It only went into effect on July 1st, 2017. Before that, we had a law that called itself a human trafficking law, that, quite frankly, the penalty did not match the heinousness of the crime. You could get a ticket for it. And the other problem, amongst many, was that you got your first trafficking victim for free. If you were only trafficking one person, it wasn't trafficking in the state of West Virginia. It was pandering or pimping or whatever, but it wasn't trafficking. Now, every victim counts in West Virginia. We have done away with the 2-victim requirement, but you had to traffic 2 people in a 6-month period to be considered a human trafficker. So we only now have a brand new law. As far as the state law goes, it is only now, we're only now starting to get recognition. We're only now starting to get recognition by the officers and the cruisers that are on the streets and protecting the communities. And we are starting to get some results from this training.
Just one small comment over here. So I think also, like any real movement we've seen to make a culture change, because that's kind of what we need to do, is it takes people like us who are super interested and who are willing to put some mattresses on our back and demand change. And I think that's what we're going to get to, and that's kind of where we are, where we have to say we need to understand trauma. We need to understand that they will likely not tell you what that trafficker is doing to them when they just met you at any point, when you're wearing a gun, when you're wearing a badge, when they've been taught their entire life not to trust you, when they're trauma bonded to this perpetrator, when that's the only person that's ever loved them or loved them recently, when that's their only friend. So I think we have to have those conversations openly, and we have to switch the way that policing is done in reference to victims. And for all of us who have been doing the sexual assault work in this room for a long, long time, we've been saying this for a long, long time. It's the same conversation, different victimization. And so I think that's where we're at as a police approach to human trafficking, is we're working on it, and we're trying to include trauma-informed training in all of the training that they receive. We're trying to be there, to be the loudest one in the room, to represent victims in the best way that we can.
And I guess to Katie's point, Mr. Leslie, when you were doing that raid and did the back pages in the hotel at that particular time, so the traffickers are normally in the parking lot, right? So they're in the car, they're watching, they help them post, or they're across the street or around.
No one came onto the lot.
Right,
With-
but what about down
with a
the street
person.
3 blocks before you come up?
We knew what was near us.
Oh, okay.
And there were only certain ways in and out of the area, which is what made it really conducive to do this. And a ways out, all the way into the front of the hotel, they were being observed for the last mile of their travel.
Oh, okay. So have you considered having advocates there as well to help with the
They were there.
interviews?
That's who was actually,
there.
like, there was no law enforcement in the room that was in the interview room. Well, there was one guy in there. But as far as who was actually doing the heavy lift in there, it was all victim advocates. It was all, I mean, that's, the only thing that went on in that room was the advocate side of it.
And that's a huge change, and that's awesome, by the way. Coming up for you.
But, back to your question, we were hoping to find somebody dumb enough to go to the parking lot. It didn't work out. No, another really interesting thing on the night is the young ladies who had made the conscious decision for whatever reason in their life that they were going to prostitute themselves, but were not trafficked. We dealt with them in such a manner that we maintained their respect. We didn't do the perp walk. You know, we had a rapport with each of them as well, and almost to every single one of them would look at us and go, well, you want to know where the trafficking is in Huntington? Let me tell you where it is. And they started spilling human intelligence like you would not believe. And it was really one of the most eventful things that I have seen in that area for this problem. Sorry.
No sorry needed. This is awesome. Thank you so very much to all of you. One of the things that we've been talking about today was what we can do. And the first thing that was really mentioned was if you see something, say something. Great. See something, say something. Then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you're talking about very specialized activities. You're talking about getting deep into the legal system. You're talking about training officers. So aside from keeping my eyes open or going to law school, what else can the folks in this room do? Because there's so many pieces to this, and I feel like I'd like to take more away from this than just what I mentioned already.
We'll all answer it. We all have an answer.
What can you do? Know people. Really know who is your neighbors. Who's the people that you come in contact with. Take that part and really get to know them. Because that's how the traffickers really went. Is because people don't feel like they're cared about. And if you reach out to that young man that's behind the counter at the gas station and you start talking to him just a little bit and ask him, do you like baseball? Are you into football? I'm into whatever. I'm not into the sports, so what are they? Cowboys. I'll just use that one, okay? I've heard that one. But once you start to make that connection, because it was July 13th, 1987, Harrisonburg, Pennsylvania, 76 truck stop, and Melvin Mass is not alive today, but he cared about me. He just cared about me. That's how I got out of trafficking, because I was being sold through the trucking company from one truck to another at that point in my life. It was that compassion. It was that caring. And that is what I keep teaching, that kindness. Be kind. And whenever I sign any of my books, I always say, always choose kindness. Because even if that waiter's having a bad day, if you are kind to them, it may make the difference that a trafficker can't pull them into that web of slavery. Versus if you ignore them and they come in and go, hey, I care about you. Let me take you on a trip. And I'm just kind of pulling that as a play that we do, okay? But just be kind. Just let, that is what's gonna do it. I work every day out there and I'm just kind. And whenever I talk to a bill collector on the phone, okay, and they're saying, you didn't make your payment, blah, 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 before I hang up, I say, thank you for your kindness and helping me to understand my problem. Not, who do you think you are? But that's where it's at. The key is what you do every day to each and every person out there that you meet. That is what's going to stop this. Okay? And Katie says she won.
Yes, Katie's got one too. I see it burning.
Yeah, it's just burning up. Pretty simple. There's really simple things you can do. Of course, everything we've already talked about. Donate. Doesn't have to be money. It can be stuff. Like I said, we need clothing constantly, paper towels. I mean, anything you use in your house, we use 20 times faster than you use it. Any paper products, your time is more valuable to us than anything you could possibly donate. We are always, always, always looking for volunteers for really simple things. We were just talking about having all of these children in the shelter over the summer. What are we going to do? They're not going to be in school. Well, you know what would be great? Have volunteers come in and host a movie night, play kickball in the backyard with them, sit down with the moms and start a book club. One of the best things the adult women in the shelter have ever liked is somebody did a journaling class with them once. Whatever you do really well or whatever you're really passionate about, you just do it for them. I really love social media. Great, start a social media campaign for us. I really like talking to people. Great, it's fair season. Ask any of my advocates. We go to everything, and we always love for people to go instead of us having to go. So volunteer to run a table at the Shepherdstown Street Fest for us. Because the work that we do directly trickles down to survivors, and it's a way that you can directly give back that's maybe not so time intensive and not as, it doesn't have to cost anything, just your time.
We had a teach-in recently about this. Well, we've had a teach-in the last 2 years on this topic. Thanks very much to Rita Neiman, because Rita has kind of been a mover on this issue since she came into our community. But one of the things that we've talked about are there are lots of levels, and if we had, a week to do this, or even if we had a whole day to do this, we'd break out into breakout sessions, and usually we split it into advocacy and then a group that's talking about legislative approaches to human trafficking, because a lot of what can be done on a legal level without you having to go to law school. It can be done from a lobbying angle, from talking to your local legislature, that's really powerful, as well as what's happening in DC. So here in the state, we've seen a tremendous amount of change. Bob's talking about the change in policy. The change in policing is also huge. So going from we're arresting you because you are the trafficked person, to really trying to prosecute the people who are benefiting and profiting off this. Using your dollars, doing research about where are you spending your money? How are you spending your money? Fair trade products, really looking at things that are thoughtfully sourced. Thinking about where does trafficking happen? The biggest number one in the United States trafficking event is the Super Bowl, right? So cities during the Super Bowl explode with tons of people who are brought in to be trafficked. And this is also a particularly scary time if you are a person who is either here on a visa or here without any kind of documentation, that if you are here as an immigrant, it is a scary time. So you have to be sort of mindful that right now, there are a lot of people who this has become even more of a risk, that it's even scarier to say something. If you're in a situation where someone is forcing you into a situation, it doesn't have to just be sex, it can be labor, it can be anything. It's a scary time to sort of try and advocate for yourself because you feel particularly vulnerable. So there are a lot of different levels of things that can be done. I'm going to hand the mic over to Rita because I want her to put in a plug for what you can do right here in your community, because she has been kind of running with this flame and this torch, and I see Dotsie and a few other people who've really kind of been doing the same thing. If you want to explain, what does this anti-human trafficking task force thing do?
Probably should let our student president talk here, but all right, folks, my heart broke for this about 10 or so years ago, also through a movie. It's amazing what a movie can do. Not For Sale haunted me for weeks. I couldn't get it out of my mind. By now it's an old movie, but it's a story that just really bothered me. What's hard for me is that everywhere I go and talk to people, they go, oh yeah, that human trafficking, that's just horrible, that's awful. I can't believe they do that stuff. But they never want to believe it's in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. But I know we saw it here. I know we've seen it here. It's always far away. It's always, It's funny because in her book, Carol shares about being in India, and the man says to her, I know that you guys in America have this problem, but surely we don't have it in India. So what can you do? First of all, be honest. It's everywhere. It's nothing new. It's been around for generation after generation. They've changed the name. I hate the name human trafficking because somehow it takes the person out of the picture. It's very distant and somebody's being moved somewhere. It's misleading. I hate that name. It's slavery. Call it what it is. It's abuse. Now, what we've had here that's been a lot of fun, if you want to do something fun in your community, do a sock hop. Get a bunch of people together. And I tell you what, the first year we did the sock hop, we had a blast. And we raised $2,300. That was 23 safe nights for a Shenandoah Women's Shelter. We thought we shot the moon. We thought life was great. The next year, we raised 39. This year, we raised 53. Yeah. You know why? Because people like to have fun. But in the meantime, while they're having fun, you're also educating them just a little bit about the need of what's going on. Whatever you do, my dear sweet husband went over to the shelter and redid one of their bathrooms. Their bathrooms are in, it's a very old building, and it has lots of needs. So if any of you are a handyman, I'm sure Katie would love to have you, because though she's dreaming of a new shelter, and I know she'll get it, in the meantime, we gotta use the one we have and we gotta keep it going. So you can go over there, you can help unplug sinks, you can clean, you can mow lawns, you can play with the kids, you can have story time. It's whatever you like to do. Let our hearts start to see as well as our eyes, you know? We can make a difference. And I know we're running over. I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And also to Laurel Chappelle, who for 3 years has stuck with us as a student. Congratulations to being a graduate, and I'll see most of you tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock for breakfast. And the rest of you, eat your hearts out, because there's more to learn. Go online.
Oh, there's so much. There's so much.
I shouldn't say that. Because when I get online, my husband sees me kind of slump in front of the computer for hours. I get fixated, and I really do get emotionally exhausted.
Yeah.
I really do. So, but you need to learn.
And you just got to refill the bucket.
Yeah.
All right, so the last action step is, you have 2 last action steps. Number 1, come up afterwards and get some information from the folks up here. Penny has her book available. If you want to come up to the front, we also have Facing the Monster available up here. We have lots of materials that you can check out, cards for lots of different resources that will give you some more things to put in your tool belt. And then our last thing is to please thank all the people who helped make this possible. Thank you to Rotary, thank you to Rita, thank you to all of our panelists, thank you to our volunteers. Big round of applause for all of them. Thank you so much. And about tomorrow, if you are coming back in the morning, things start downstairs. Breakfast will not be up here, breakfast will be on the main floor in what we call the Ram's Den. So floor number 1, not ground level, up 1. So that's where breakfast will be in the morning, but we hope you will have a great time while you're here in Shepherdstown. And Rotary, do you have any final things you want to add?
Not really, but one little thing. So, if you're not a Rotarian and you cannot fit that into your schedule, we have a group called Core Community. Rotary is not going to let this issue and what we can do die. We want it to go away, but it's going to take time. So if you want to further some actions, contact any Rotary group in all of the Panhandle of West Virginia and find out what they're doing. Maybe they're having a pancake breakfast, maybe they're having a sock hop. And if you just get behind that, then you might be making a difference that you just don't know about. And I just want to close with one thing about blinders being on our eyes. Part of this of our campaign, we spent almost $4,000 on billboards. The lady from the billboards company, exact words were, when we sent her the graphics, which we used very simple things, I think that was one of them right there, can you see her? And her words were, I'm sorry we can't do this because our area is not ready for this. And I thought to myself, I also work at a food pantry, and one of the little girls said, when her mother said, take this quarter out and put it in the meter so we don't get a parking ticket because it's $5 and we're in here getting food and we can't afford $5. And the little girl said, she's about maybe 15, I'm not gonna do that. They're taking people right off the street in Martinsburg. I don't think it's quite maybe at that level, but she had enough fear and enough something, wherever she got it from school, from her classmates, from online, to have that fear, but yet to be told that the billboards, we weren't ready for that. And I thought, no, we're beyond ready for that. So I think just being personally aware, and I just want to give one shout out on how dedicated Rotarians are. This gentleman snuck in over here, and he's from State College. So he drove about 3.5 to 4 hours to come down here. And when I said, hey, do you want us to find you a room? He goes, no, that's what auto books are for. So now he's headed back up to State College. So look up a Rotarian, look up the Shenandoah Women's Center, anything that you can to make a difference, and I think we'll have an ear for you. Thank you all for traveling so far. I know that was a commitment of your love, your labor, and your time. Thank you all very much.